Welcome to Woman Power. I'm your host, Lisa Diane Wedgeworth. Welcome to Woman Power. Today, I'm joined by Liz Dubelman, executive editor at Witty, and the founder and creator of VidLit, and Selwa Sweidan, an artist, designer, curator, and professor at Loyola Marymount University, for a wonderful conversation about women and technology. A lot of people out there have misconceptions about what technology is. Some have a visceral response to technology, like when thinking about math, for instance. The definition of technology is science or knowledge put into practical use to solve problems or invent useful tools. Ladies, how do you define technology?
I think technology is really meant to enhance life, but we're not really quick at adapting. We're quicker, but we're not so quick at adapting technology. And that's where we sort of get into trouble. When my grandparents had their tenement wired in the Lower East Side of New York City in, I don't know, the 1900s, they were afraid to touch the walls because they thought they would be electrocuted. Wow. And so they all lived, everybody in the tenement, hundreds and hundreds of people lived in the center of the room.
Wow.
But as they got more and more used to electricity, they were able to spread out and live in the entire room. And that's sort of where we are with our current technology. We're living in the middle of the room, and we need to sort of trust it and learn about it, and then we can live in the entire room.
I like that visual.
That's such an interesting story about being afraid of touching the walls. And it's interesting to think about how that applies to maybe some of the technologies. That makes me think about the conversations around artificial intelligence and how important it is to not be afraid of the walls, but also to embrace what we are afraid of. I think it's important to ask this question of how we're defining technology in order to redefine it. And with the artists and designers I work with the students I teach, I try to give them the tools to access what we think of emerging technology, but also get them comfortable enough to feel brave enough to redefine the technology or to push back at current definitions. But that story about the walls is going to stay with me.
And that's a very good point. You have to be brave with technology, which is difficult for everybody.
Yeah. So we're embracing bravery today, right? And for all the women in technology, right? So we're talking about women working in the field of technology and those who have creative practices. We exist. Liz, you are the executive editor at Witty, Women in Technology International. Please explain your role in the history of Witty.
So Witty is a company that's 30 years old. And Carolyn Layton started it, and she saw a need to help women in this particular area that was very male-dominated of technology. And so our job is to inspire, to innovate, and to teach inclusivity, to help women find their place in technology and to help them kick down doors.
I like that. And as an executive editor at Witty,
I mostly deal with the content.
Okay.
So at witty.com, so we have several different areas. We do a lot of conferences which educate women. We do webinars also for education. And we have a lot of articles for retention so that you can keep your job as well as move forward with your job. So basically what we do is we help people, women or people that identify as female, in the area of technology. And every company has a technology area. It didn't used to be this way, but now you could be working at Walmart and they have a technology company. Everything is technology these days.
Wonderful. So 30 years ago, Carolyn sees this need to create an organization that supports, empowers women, and builds a community for women. We fast forward till today, and Wired.com recently publishes an article entitled 5 Years of Tech Diversity Reports and Little Progress. So why has so little changed? Why do men still dominate the field?
Well, there's a number of reasons. One of the reasons is women see a position at the top of the technology, in the C-suite level of technology, and they see that there's one position available. And so they sort of stand back and they say, well, there's only one position available, you have it. But there's more than one position available.
Right.
You just have to kick down doors. The other reason is that men have oftentimes, not always, have partners or wives that will do the emotional heavy lifting in the family. So women are often divided, and they have to take care of what's for dinner, and they have to take care of the children, and they have to think ahead of the schedule, and they're not afforded the same opportunity to just focus on one thing.
Well, in line of not focusing on one thing or carrying a lot, right? Holding a lot of responsibility. Selwa, you wear many hats. You're an artist, you're a designer, and you are an educator. What can we do to introduce girls and women and underrepresented populations to technology as a career option?
You know, it makes me think back to the question you just asked about what's going on in terms of the stats around women in technology. And that makes me think about the history of technology. When we think of World War II era innovations, it was women making those innovations. The computers, the actual people doing the computing, what we're called computers, the programmers, were there's a majority of women working in the field. So that sort of shift, it's interesting to think about when that shift happened and how even linguistically we stopped calling people doing that job programmers and switch to coders, and all of the very subtle ways that gender comes into play. And then fast forwarding to now, how we're able to then start thinking about gender in different ways, because you mentioned working with female identifying individuals, and that's expanded so much. But in terms of expanding inclusion, I mean, I think it's such a complex question that we can address in many ways, but in terms of education, I think the conversations are really important to have within academia, but also definitely outside of academia. There's a lot of really wonderful organizations in Los Angeles that focus on including marginalized communities, or not only catering to white voices, because quite often when there's conversations around gender inclusion, the intersectionality might drop off. There's sort of that danger there. So I feel like there's a really rich community in Los Angeles, in Santa Monica as well, developing workshops, outreach programs with schools. I do a lot of work with Naval, an organization in downtown Los Angeles that really puts equity and kinship at the heart of what they do, and they partner with a lot of organizations and bring in a lot of quite radical voices that are trying to push in terms of who's getting access to learning these technologies, but who might be able to author these technologies and reimagine these technologies.
And access is extremely important, right? Seeing representation, seeing yourself there so you know that this is possible, because a lot of times we don't envision a certain future because we don't see it, right? It's not modeled for us.
And having conversations with other women. You know, women are taught to hide their salaries, you know, when they should be sharing them with other women, because then we know what's going on. When I went to the Witty Summit last year, I was on a bus from a very large corporation. We were taking the bus from the airport to the hotel, and it was a bus full of women who had worked at this corporation for a really long time and never met each other. So we have a tendency to keep them everybody separate. Because if you keep them siloed, then everything stays the same.
And when we start talking, we understand experience, how to negotiate, right? It empowers us. This has been eye-opening. Let's get into your creative work in technology when we come back from the break. Welcome back to Woman Power. We've been having a wonderful conversation with Liz and Selwa, creative women working in technology. Let's talk about an early project where you combine your passions for art and technology. Selwa, I'd love for you to share a bit about radical sensing.
Yeah, thanks for asking me about that project. So radical sensing, it's a body of research that looks at prototyping and imagining what the future of scent technology is. as a way of thinking about how we can start quantifying the harder to describe and harder to embody senses that might become part of a future experience in virtual spaces and augmented spaces. So the work looks at, it takes brain-computer interfaces, brain-computer technology, which is currently used. There's a lot of research in the applied space of brain-computer interfaces and augmenting and empowering those who are quadriplegic or have lost usage of limbs or articulation of limbs. But the research we looked at was what the future of sharing of scent data could be, and what it would mean if we had augmented prosthetics that kind of taking the idea to an extreme conclusion. If we chose to get rid of our nose in the future, or other limbs or other organs, what it would mean to have a prosthetic nose, and how we could translate senses, share senses. So imagine you and I, Liz, being remotely engaging. So you're somewhere in Santa Monica and I might be somewhere outside, but I wanted to share a really beautiful dish I was eating, or share a memory from our high school. So that, in a nutshell, is what the research was about.
What I loved about it also, I was watching the video, is your collaborator states, how do you design something? It might have been your collaborator, how do you design something for a technology that doesn't exist yet? And you collaborated with movement dancers to create this experience. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so working with dancers and movement-based practices is very much at the heart of what I do. And it led me to bring this practice of working with dancers along with this practice of what's called speculative prototyping for the future of a technology together. And it was a really exciting moment to be able to bring those in conversation. But essentially the dancers were a way of articulating and sketching how this technology could come into play in a powerful visual form.
Wonderful. It's really great. We'll make sure to have a link for everyone to visit. So Liz, talk to us about VidLit. What inspired you to create this company?
Well, it was about 10 years ago, and it was a time when they had stopped, the publishers had stopped putting authors on tour. And for me, the way I fall in love with a book, the way I fall in love with a song, the way I fall in love with a dance is to see it.
Yes.
Have someone read it to you, have someone sing you a song. So when they stopped putting authors on tour, I thought, well, I could record them. And then I could put some words as design elements and some primitive animation and put it out, and then it could be sort of like a virtual tour. And that's where the idea of video literature came from. And that was great for a long time, and then a lot of the publishers brought that in-house and made it very formulaic. They made it like a trailer for a movie or a trailer for a television show. And reading is very different than either one of those things. And I was disappointed with that. So I sort of pivoted a little, even though we still do some VidLits, to teaching artists, and artists in different verticals, authors first, and then fine artists and musicians, how to use their time both to create and market. Because if nobody is hearing or seeing what you're doing, you're not connecting.
Right.
And you really need your message to connect. So you need to both create and market, but not spend all your time marketing or you'll go crazy. Because you're an artist.
And that's a dilemma as an artist, right? As a creative, that we do spend a lot of time making, thinking, processing, and making, and a lot of time we don't dedicate time to promoting and sharing that information. And so we do have a lot of platforms that are available to us today. So it's great that you are taking this lead to guiding artists to doing that and other creatives. And I just have to say, I love VidLit. I think it is wonderful. Your video, or the VidLit, as it's called, of learning Yiddish with Dick and Jane is hilarious. I am looking forward to using some of those words. So I have to just practice where and how. So what are each of you currently working on?
So I have an exhibition that I've co-curated coming up this Saturday, January 25th is the opening, and there's programming happening March 4th. And as you know, Lisa, you're part of the exhibition. We're really excited to have your work.
And it is called?
You have a beautiful piece that engages, I won't give away the text, but the work So the whole theme of the show, Embodiment, really looks at the body as site, the body as material, the body as portal, the body as process. And it was really exciting to have your work. We just installed it yesterday in the show, to have it there, but to really engage with its materiality. You use hair as a means to sew, to draw text. And the text has a really powerful message, which I won't give away because I want the audience to come and see it.
Thank you. I appreciate that, but I was really wanted you to talk about the name of the show, not me. But I appreciate that. I appreciate the love. Thank you so much for holding the space with me today, ladies, and contributing to this important conversation. Join us next as we shine our spotlight on performance artist and technologist Tiffany Trenda. Thank you for joining us in the studio today, Tiffany. As a creative technologist and performance artist from Los Angeles, you are in ground zero of screen culture. How do you think social media has affected women's sexuality today?
Yeah, for example, like Lev Manovic recently did a project, Selfie City, and showing how more females, of course, are doing selfies than males, and we know that. So in a way, like, females are kind of taking back the control of like what used to be the male gaze, which was like historically more men were taking the control of the photos and dominating that industry. Now females are more taking selfies, so they're the ones in control of the image making process. But instead of like the male gaze, and even though they're constructing images that they've seen, like even the younger generation, we're seeing images that look like historically of the male's gaze. Instead, I think that they're constructing images for the internet's gaze. They're constructing their bodies for the internet's gaze, and I think the images are about popularity instead of constructing for a male or female.
I like this idea of the internet's gaze, right? We all participate. If we're on social media, which the majority of us all, we're all on some level participating in this internet gaze. So regardless of one's gender, so do you think that means it comes from a place of empowerment? Because regardless of one's gender, who might be the gazer, it seems then possibly as if the person creating the content is in control on some level, and that kind of leads towards branding and creating a strategy.
Yeah, I mean, we're constructing identities. We're constructing like these personas, and we're all doing that. It used to be it was celebrities were the only ones that were doing that, and that was like a media sensation. But now it's like, it is internet sensation. It's about like we are constructing it just for the internet, but also like we're all doing this. We're revealing and concealing a part of ourselves through the internet. So with social media, we're revealing what we want the people to know about us. And it's always like, the good pictures or how, we look in an image might even foretell like, what our lifestyle is and like our culture and all of these different things. But still, we're very much concealing, who in essence we are.
Right. Interesting. So how do you see the relationship of technology and the human body developing?
They said like in the past, the past 10 years has all been about the screens, like our cell phone screens, our computer screens, but that's not going to be relevant anymore. So in the next, we're going to see in this decade now, is it's all about AR and VR. So not necessarily the screens that we're used to, but a different type of screen. And also, I think it's going to be more sensory-based systems. So we're going to be wearing in our clothes, and also I think embedding into our own bodies. Things are going to be embedded even they're talking about brains, which we've talked about before through like the army and everything. But I think we're going to see more and more of that we're going to be more towards the notion of the cyborg.
Well, we're already seeing that on some level. I can't think of what the brand is at this time, but there is a commercial out with headphones. I don't know if you've seen it, where someone's wearing headphones, they're listening to music, and then they say, hey, where's the closest barbershop, or where can I find water, and it leads them there, right? So they're not even using their phones anymore. It's this technology that's on their body.
Yeah, for example, DoorDash came out with like a jean jacket a couple years ago, and it actually had a sensor within the jacket. And so, you could be writing and saying like, I want to listen to this type of music or doing these types of things. I also think thinking about like Fitbot and how we have all of these different devices that are creating data from the body, but yet I don't think that just creating data from the body is used in the best way. I think that there could be a way that we could use data to help influence a better generation of people and being more empathetic.
It becomes a much more intimate experience, and it really leads into my next question, that your performances seem very intimate in many ways. Can you explain why you chose to create these experiences?
Yeah, again, it's like I think we're forgetting about I think the people that are creating our technologies are forgetting about how to pull people together, how to connect people together. It seems like we're trying to, but in a way we're also more separated. There's less of a physical touch. Like when we think of touch, we think of like our cell phones, we think of our iPads. And so what I try to do is can we take our technology and create more of an intimate experience, create more empathy for one another, and see about hug, touch, caress, but also like play and engage and experience, and see if we can connect as people much better with technologies.
And you do that with Ubiquitous States. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yes, Ubiquitous States took my heartbeat, which I recorded in different places in the country, and I designed a 3D printed dress and mask, and I interacted with people by, I would touch them on their wrist, and they would see their heartbeat and my heartbeat with a screen embedded into the dress. And so during the performance, we would try to match each other's heartbeats. So you would hear my heartbeat, I would hear their heartbeat, and we try to match each other's heartbeat. And it's based off of like how music and different sounds in the environment can change your heartbeat. But can we, have an intimate experience that way? Can we try and match each other's, like in a way, I think heartbeats are like the soul, you know?
And it becomes more of a collaborative experience.
Exactly.
Which I think is important, right? Because it brings people together, because if we're talking about this new way in which we're engaging, creating, using screens to create these alternate or created realities, and with this AR experience that you're talking about, you're bringing people together, right? Creating a community. So speaking of community, you've recently become a mother.
Yes.
To a wonderful little boy. How do you plan on introducing technology to your child?
Yes, it's interesting because what I've been researching, reading about, like for example, like with cell phone screens and iPads, like a lot of sometimes mothers do give that to their child, and I know sometimes I'm guilty of it as well. I think we all are. But I've read actually it can hinder certain things in the child. So like before the age of 4, you're really not supposed to have too many hours, and really try to really limit it, because like there are certain stages, especially with like object permanence and stuff, that it can actually hinder sort of a growth later on in life, and they've now seen that. So and I think it's a lot to do with like the interaction, because before we did watch TV, we watched television and things like that, but now it's about like picking up the phone, and I see my 2-year-old, and he already is like swiping and doing all these things. So it's the idea of like this interaction of like these aren't real objects inside this. They don't understand that yet. So it's definitely like, but you also don't want to limit them too, because like in a way, I think I think it's going to affect all of this technology is going to change, and it's going to change how we introduce it to our children. So.
Right, because there are varying levels of technology, right? And when a child is developing, there are important stages of hand-eye coordination, touching actual objects, right? Feeling shape and texture. And you're missing a lot of that. You're missing all of it on a screen. Right?
Exactly.
Interesting.
So play, the actual idea of play is so important to a child.
Right. But at the same time, the technology is important, because your son is now in a generation where that's the majority of
the things.
The technology that he's going to use. So what are you currently working on?
I'm working on a piece called Amygdala. So it is a augmented reality piece where I invite the public to touch me, actually, with an AR device, actually the HoloLens. And it is conceptually based off of sexual assault, and how the brain can be permanently changed from sexual assault, or even trauma, like trauma victims, like war victims. Like if you go through some type of trauma, it can change your brain, especially with emotions and stuff. But the piece is really focused also on how technology today with like augmented reality and especially virtual reality, they're focused on the idea that it's like an empathy machine. And they're trying to put you in someone else's shoes, saying like you're going to have these emotions. But the thing is that we all come from different experiences, we have different histories, and so we're going to react to a situation differently than somebody else's. So what I'm trying to do is, yes, I want to create empathy, but also and inform people, but I also am trying to allow people to bring their own emotions, their own experience into the piece, and to engage with the piece in that way. And it's inspired by like the hashtag Me Too movement, and also The Body Keeps the Score by Coke. So there's a lot of like to inform people about different things, and that's why it's called the amygdala, because that's a part of the brain that can be changed permanently.
Right. Well, your work sounds really amazing. I'd love to see it in person, and I know that I can, and members of our audience can, because we're actually both in a show that opens on January the 25th. It's called Beyond Embodiment. And the opening is Saturday, January the 25th from 6 to 9, and you will be performing at 7:30 p.m. And will you please briefly tell us a little bit about the name of the work and the work that you'll be performing?
Sure. The piece is called Proximity Cinema, and it's an interactive suit. And there are 38 cell phone screens embedded into the suit.
Wow.
They're touch as well as they're on proximity sensors. So depending on how far you're away from the body, the screens will change with different text pieces. And of course, you can swipe them and see images of my body underneath the suit. So again, a very intimate experience where I'll be going and hugging and touching people and caressing people and engaging in that way.
Well, that's exciting. I will definitely be there, of course, and I will make sure to swipe and get a hug in. Well, it has been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much.
Thank
it really
you.
has been a
Thank
pleasure.
you so much.
Yeah, that's exciting. Can't wait. I'd like to close with a few thoughts by Carolyn Layton. In the video, The Story of Witty, she states, "Everyone in the room has value. This is the heart of woman power, that we have come together as a team of women and men to produce a show that is relevant and necessary and is for you. For this, I am so grateful." But specifically, she is speaking about women in the workforce, how we must value each other regardless of our titles, regardless of our roles. She also says, what can I do to enrich a person's life? That if we all do this for each other, the energy will be immediately uplifted to a better place and everybody wins. May we all win. Thank you so much.